The gun barrel pressed cold against June Carver's temple as the outlaw's breath reeked of whiskey and malice. "Your husband took something from us before he died, widow. Now you're going to tell me where it is, or I'll paint these prairie walls with your pretty brains." But June Carver wasn't the trembling flower Red Mesa expected. Her fingers found the derringer hidden in her skirt, just as a shadow filled the doorway, tall, scarred, and more dangerous than any outlaw. Colt Mercer had made a dying promise to protect her. Tonight, he'd prove that some vows are written in blood. If you're ready for a tale of forced marriage, forbidden love, and redemption carved from violence, stay with me until the end. And please, comment below with your city so I can see how far June and Colt's story travels across this wild world of ours. The morning sun hadn't yet burned the frost off Red Mesa's main street when June Carver found herself standing before Judge Reddick's mahogany desk, her black mourning dress a stark accusation against the faded courthouse walls. 3 weeks. That's all the time they'd given her to grieve Owen Carver, the man who'd worn the sheriff's star for 8 years before the Draven gang left him bleeding out on the Copper Ridge Road. 3 weeks, and the vultures were already circling. "Mrs. Carver," Judge Reddick's voice carried the practiced authority of a man who'd sentenced dozens without losing sleep. "The territorial law is unambiguous. A woman cannot hold property without male guardianship. Your late husband's ranch, all 200 acres, reverts to territorial possession unless you remarry within 30 days of his death." June's gloved hands tightened on the small black purse she carried, her mother's pearls clicking softly inside. "Judge Reddick, surely there must be some provision." "There isn't." The judge's weathered face showed all the sympathy of granite. "The county needs that land productive, Mrs. Carver, not sitting fallow while you indulge your grief. The town council has already identified a suitable candidate for your hand." Behind her, the courthouse door creaked open on hinges that needed oil. Heavy boots crossed the wooden floor with the measured cadence of a man who'd learned to move carefully through dangerous spaces. June didn't need to turn around to know who'd entered. The sudden hush that fell over the room, the way Judge Reddick's eyes narrowed, the subtle shift in the air itself told her everything. Colt Mercer. She'd seen him before, of course. Everyone in Red Mesa knew the silent cowboy who drifted into town 2 years ago with nothing but a worn saddle, a faster gun hand than anyone had seen, and eyes the color of a winter sky before snow. Owen had hired him despite the town's protests, put him to work on the ranch, and refused to discuss whatever past had carved those scars into Mercer's face and put that careful wariness in his every movement. Now, as June finally turned to look at the man who'd become her husband's most trusted hand, she found herself cataloging details she'd never noticed before. Tall, easily 6'2", with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway and hands that looked equally comfortable holding reins, or a Colt 45. His dark hair needed cutting, falling across a forehead marked by a thin white scar that ran from his left temple down to his jaw. His clothes were clean but well worn, canvas work pants, a faded blue shirt, a leather vest that had seen better years. Everything about Colt Mercer spoke of function over form, survival over comfort. "Mr. Mercer has agreed to the arrangement," Judge Reddick continued, shuffling papers with bureaucratic efficiency. "Your late husband left him 40 acres in his will, recognition for 2 years of loyal service. Combined with your holdings, it'll make a respectable spread, more than respectable." June's breath caught. Owen had left land to Mercer? In all the chaos following the murder, she hadn't even looked at the will's specifics, had simply signed where the lawyer pointed and tried to breathe through the suffocating weight of sudden widowhood. "You're saying my husband planned this?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Mercer spoke for the first time, his voice low and rough, like stones grinding together. "Owen was a careful man, Mrs. Carver. He saw trouble coming." Trouble. June turned the word over, tasting its bitterness. "Is that what we're calling my husband's murder now? Trouble?" Something flickered in Mercer's winter sky eyes, pain perhaps, or anger carefully controlled. "I call it what it was, ma'am. Murder, cold-blooded and calculated. The Draven gang doesn't leave witnesses by accident." "Yet you survived," Reverend Piton interjected smoothly, entering the courthouse behind Mercer. His sanctimonious expression made June's skin crawl, had made her skin crawl since the funeral when he delivered a sermon about God's mysterious ways while looking at her like she was somehow responsible for Owen's death. Curious, isn't it? You rode out with the sheriff that night, Mr. Mercer, yet you returned unscathed while Sheriff Carver came home in a pine box. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mercer turned to face the Reverend with a stillness that was more threatening than any aggressive movement could have been. I returned, Mercer said quietly, because Owen ordered me to ride back and warn the town, told me the gang was bigger than we'd thought, that they needed to know. I followed orders. By the time I got help and rode back, he was already gone. How convenient, Reverend Piton murmured. How fortunate, Judge Reddick corrected sharply, that Mr. Mercer survived to provide an account of the attack. Now, unless you have evidence of wrongdoing, Reverend, I suggest we proceed with the matter at hand. June watched this exchange with growing unease. The town had already tried and convicted Colt Mercer in the court of public opinion, she realized. They feared him, feared his speed with a gun, feared the violence that seemed to cling to him like morning fog, feared whatever past had driven him to Red Mesa. Now they resented him for surviving when their beloved sheriff had not. I don't require a husband, June said, though she knew the words were futile even as she spoke them. I'm perfectly capable of managing the ranch myself. No, you're not. Reverend Piton's smile was patronizing in its kindness. It's unseemly, Mrs. Carver, a young woman alone on that property. People talk. They whisper about why Owen was out that night, why he rode toward Copper Ridge when the Draven gang was known to be operating near Silver Creek. They wonder if perhaps there were reasons a wife might want her husband absent. The accusation hung in the air like gun smoke. June felt heat rise in her cheeks, fury and humiliation warring in her chest. How dare you suggest— I suggest nothing, the Reverend interrupted smoothly, but a proper marriage will quiet such speculation. Mr. Mercer is willing. You should be grateful. Grateful. The word tasted like ashes. June looked at Colt Mercer again, really looked at him. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken in his own defense. Did he want this any more than she did? Or was he simply following orders, as he'd apparently done for Owen that fatal night? When? June asked quietly, defeat settling over her shoulders like a heavy winter shawl. Tomorrow morning, Judge Reddick said. 10 o'clock. A simple civil ceremony. No need for anything elaborate given the circumstances. The circumstances. Her husband murdered 3 weeks ago, her reputation questioned by men who'd known her since childhood, her future decided by a council that saw her as property to be transferred from one male guardian to another. June's spine stiffened. Fine, but I have conditions. Judge Reddick's eyebrows rose toward his receding hairline. You're hardly in a position to negotiate, Mrs. Carver. Nevertheless, June turned to face Colt Mercer directly, meeting those winter sky eyes with all the courage she could muster. I'll need to speak with Mr. Mercer privately. For the first time since entering the courthouse, Mercer moved, a slight shift of weight, a nearly imperceptible relaxation of his shoulders. When he spoke, his voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. Outside, he said. Not a question. June nodded and followed him out of the courthouse, acutely aware of the eyes watching them through windows and doorways. News traveled faster than wildfire in Red Mesa, and by evening, every soul in town would know about tomorrow's wedding. They stopped near the water trough outside Morrison's general store, and Mercer leaned against the hitching post with practiced ease. Up close, June could see the lines around his eyes, not from laughter, but from years of squinting against sun and wind and danger. He couldn't be more than 35, but his face carried the weight of hard decades. You don't want this, June said. It wasn't a question. Neither do you. His voice held no emotion, just stated fact. Then why agree? Mercer was quiet for a long moment, his eyes drifting to the horizon where dust devils danced in the morning heat. I owed your husband. He gave me work when no one else would. Didn't ask questions about my past. This is how I pay that debt. By marrying his widow. By keeping you safe. The words were simple, but June heard the weight behind them. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the climbing sun. Owen worried about you, Mercer continued, still not meeting her eyes. Especially near the end, Said there were rumors about the Draven gang moving closer. Said they had their eyes on the ranch, on something they thought he'd taken from them. He made me promise. Mercer stopped abruptly, jaw tightening. Promise what? To look after you if something happened. June felt tears prick her eyes. Owen had known. Somehow, her careful, methodical husband had known danger was coming and had tried to protect her even in death. He never told me, she whispered. He wouldn't have wanted to worry you. They stood in silence, watching a freight wagon rumble past, the driver tipping his hat to June with exaggerated courtesy. She knew what he saw, the widow Carver, standing too close to the dangerous gunman everyone feared. Tomorrow that sight would be legal, sanctioned, expected. My conditions are simple, June said finally. This will be a marriage in name only. You'll have your room, I'll have mine. I'll cook and keep house. You'll work the land. We'll be business partners, nothing more. Mercer nodded once, a sharp dip of his chin. Fair enough. And I won't be treated as property. I may have to marry you by law, but I won't be owned. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or understanding. I don't own things that can think for themselves, Mrs. Carver. It was an odd way to phrase it, but June understood the meaning. She extended her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Mercer shook it. His palm was calloused, his grip firm, but not crushing. Tomorrow, then, she said. Tomorrow. June turned to leave, then paused. Why do they fear you, the townspeople? What are they afraid of? Mercer's expression didn't change, but his eyes grew distant, focused on something only he could see. Because they're smart enough to fear what they don't understand, ma'am. It wasn't really an answer, but June didn't press. Tomorrow she'd be married to this stranger, this man with secrets written in the scars on his skin and shadows in his eyes. Tonight, she had one last evening as Owen Carver's widow. She walked home alone, back straight despite the weight of gossip and judgment pressing down from every window and doorway. Behind her, she felt Mercer watching, and wondered if he was already keeping that promise to her dead husband. So, the house felt emptier than usual when June arrived. Owen's chair still sat by the fireplace, his pipe resting on the side table where he'd left it that last morning. June touched it gently, then moved through the rooms like a ghost, memorizing each space as it existed now, before another man's presence changed it forever. She prepared a simple supper but couldn't eat. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table with Owen's old journal, reading his careful notes about cattle prices, weather patterns, and the daily minutiae of ranch life. On the last page, dated just 2 days before his death, she found something that made her breath catch. Colt Mercer is a good man, despite what others say. Dangerous, yes, but that danger is leashed by honor. If anything happens to me, he'll do right by June. I've made sure of it. June closed the journal and pressed it against her chest. Oh, Owen, she whispered to the empty room. Even in this, you were trying to protect me. As darkness fell, she prepared for bed in the room she'd shared with her husband for 8 years. Tomorrow night, she'd sleep here alone while a stranger occupied the spare room down the hall. It was better than losing everything, she told herself. Better than becoming a charity case or worse. But as she lay in the dark, listening to coyotes howl in the distance, June couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would change more than just her name. Something in Colt Mercer's eyes, that careful watchfulness, that controlled stillness, spoke of a man who'd learned to survive in a hard world by becoming harder himself. What kind of man was she binding herself to? And what secrets lay behind that scarred, silent face? The questions followed her into uneasy dreams, where Owen's voice whispered warnings she couldn't quite hear, and winter sky eyes watched her from the shadows. Tick. The next morning dawned clear and cold. June dressed in a simple gray dress, not quite morning black, but far from festive. As she pinned up her dark hair, she caught her reflection in the small mirror above her dresser and barely recognized herself. 28 years old, widow, and in an hour, bride again. The ceremony was every bit as joyless as she'd expected. Judge Reddick's office, not the church. No guests except Reverend Peton as witness, and Mrs. Hutchkins, the judge's secretary, standing in the corner with her pinched face radiating disapproval. Colt Mercer arrived exactly on time, wearing the same clothes as yesterday but with a clean white shirt that looked suspiciously new. His dark hair was still damp from washing, and June noticed for the first time that when he wasn't scowling, his features held a rugged handsomeness that years of hard living couldn't quite erase. "Do you, June Elizabeth Carver, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" June looked at Colt Mercer, at this stranger who'd promised to protect her, and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or the only choice that made sense. "I do." "Do you, Colt Mercer, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Mercer's eyes met hers, and for just a moment, June thought she saw something soft there, something almost gentle. "I do. By the power vested in me by the territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Judge Reddick didn't say the words about kissing. Neither of them moved to bridge the distance between them. The whole affair took less than 5 minutes. June signed the marriage certificate with a hand that barely trembled. Colt Mercer's signature was surprisingly elegant, the handwriting of an educated man. "Congratulations," Reverend Piton said, though his tone suggested condolences would be more appropriate. "May God have mercy on you both." They walked out of the courthouse into brilliant morning sunshine, married now in the eyes of law and God, but strangers in every way that mattered. "I'll bring my things to the ranch this afternoon," Mercer said quietly as they stood on the courthouse steps. "If that suits you." "The spare room is ready." "Thank you, Mrs." He caught himself. "June." Her name sounded strange in his rough voice. "Colt," she said, testing his name on her tongue. He nodded once, then walked toward the livery stable with that same measured gait, neither hurried nor slow. June watched him go and wondered what she'd just done. "Well," Mrs. Hutchkins said from behind her, "that was certainly quick. Some might say too quick." June turned to face the older woman, anger finally breaking through her careful composure. "And some might say it's none of their business, Mrs. Hutchkins. Good day." She walked to where she'd tied her mare, mounted with more force than necessary, and rode home without looking back. Pas. Colt Mercer arrived at the ranch 3 hours later, riding a paint horse and leading a pack mule that carried everything he owned. June watched from the kitchen window as he unloaded his gear, saddlebags, bedroll, rifle, and a worn trunk that had seen better days. She met him at the door. "The room's at the end of the hall, second door on the right." "Obliged." He carried his trunk inside, boots echoing on the wooden floor. June had cleaned the spare room that morning, put fresh linens on the narrow bed, emptied the old chest of drawers. Now she stood awkwardly in the hallway as her new husband, God, that word felt wrong, surveyed his quarters. "It's fine," he said. "Better than I'm used to. There's a washstand, and I put towels. It's fine, June." His repetition was gentle. "Thank you." They stared at each other for a long moment, the air thick with unspoken questions and unacknowledged fears. "I'll start supper," June said finally, retreating to familiar territory. "I'll see to the horses." They separated to their tasks, and June threw herself into cooking with desperate focus. She made pot roast with potatoes and carrots, biscuits from scratch, apple pie because she needed to keep her hands busy. By the time Colt returned from the barn, the kitchen smelled like home, even if nothing else felt familiar. He washed at the pump outside, then entered the kitchen with his hat in his hands. "Smells good." "Sit." June gestured to the table where she'd set 2 places. "It's ready." They ate in uncomfortable silence, the clink of silverware against plates the only sound. June found herself stealing glances at him, noting the careful way he ate, the way he sat with his back to the wall, the way his eyes tracked every movement, even while he seemed focused on his food. "You don't trust easily," she observed. Colt looked up, something like surprise crossing his features. "No, ma'am." "June," she corrected. "If we're married, even in name only, you should use my name." "June," he agreed. "And no, I don't trust easy. Been burned too many times." "By who?" He was quiet for a moment, weighing how much to reveal. "By everyone, eventually. Life taught me to expect betrayal, safer that way." "That's a lonely way to live." "Lonely's better than dead." June couldn't argue with that logic, however bleak. She served the pie, watched him take a bite, saw genuine pleasure cross his face. "This is good," he said. "Really good. Owen was a lucky man." The mention of her first husband hung between them like smoke. June set down her fork, appetite gone. He was a good man, she said quietly. Not perfect, but good. He deserved better than dying alone on a dark road. Yes, he did. You cared about him. He gave me a chance when no one else would. That means something. June studied Colt's face, seeing past the scars to the man beneath. What did you do? Before Red Mesa, I mean. What are you running from? His jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his own fork and met her eyes directly. I was a gun for hire. Worked for whoever paid best, did whatever they asked as long as the price was right. I robbed, I killed, I hurt people who probably didn't deserve it. I wasn't a good man, June. I was exactly what everyone in this town thinks I am. Was, June repeated, latching onto the past tense. You're talking about the past. The past has a way of catching up. Is that what you're afraid of? That your old life will find you here? Colt leaned back in his chair, and June saw the weariness in him, the weight of years spent looking over his shoulder. I'm afraid, he said slowly, that I'll bring trouble to your door, that marrying me will put you in more danger than you'd have faced alone. But Owen made me promise, and I don't break promises to dead men. June felt something shift in her chest, not quite sympathy, but understanding. They were both trapped, both trying to honor a dead man's wishes while navigating an impossible situation. Then we'll face whatever comes, she said, together, as partners. That was the agreement. Partners, Colt repeated, as if testing the word. I can do that. After supper, they established a routine. Colt washed while June dried. He asked about the ranch's operations, and she shared what she knew, which animals needed attention, which fences wanted mending, which fields should be planted come spring. You know more than you think, he observed. Owen taught you well. He tried. I didn't always listen. You listening now? June smiled despite herself. I don't have much choice, do I? We always have choices, June. Sometimes they're just all bad ones. As darkness fell, they found themselves standing awkwardly in the hallway between their separate rooms. Well, June said. Good night, then. Good night. But neither of them moved. The air felt charged somehow, full of possibilities neither dared acknowledge. June, Colt said quietly, I know this isn't what you wanted, but I'll try to be a decent husband in the ways that matter. I'll protect you, provide for you, respect you. That's the best I can offer. June felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. That's more than I expected. Thank you, Colt. He nodded once, then retreated to his room. June did the same, closing her door and leaning against it, breathing hard. She was married. Again. To a man she barely knew, a confessed killer, someone the whole town feared. And yet, standing in that hallway, she'd felt safer than she had since Owen's death. June changed into her nightgown and climbed into the big empty bed. Through the wall she could hear Colt moving about, the creak of floorboards, the sound of boots being removed. Tomorrow they'd begin their life as husband and wife in name. Tomorrow she'd start learning to run this ranch properly. Tomorrow she'd face the whispers and judgment of Red Mesa. But tonight, for the first time in 3 weeks, June Mercer now, felt like she might actually survive this. The prairie winds sang around the house, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled its loneliness to the stars. June closed her eyes and let exhaustion finally claim her, pulling her down into dreamless sleep. Down the hall, Colt Mercer lay awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. He'd made a promise to a dying man, keep June safe, no matter the cost, but he hadn't expected her to be so damn brave, so sharp-tongued, so utterly unlike the simpering widow he'd anticipated. She saw too much, asked too many questions, made him want to tell truths he'd buried deep. That was dangerous. Everything about June Mercer was dangerous, but Colt had faced danger before and survived. He'd do it again, for Owen's memory, for the debt he owed, and maybe, just maybe, for the woman sleeping down the hall who'd looked at him like he might be more than the sum of his worst choices. The thought terrified him more than any gun ever had. The morning sun found June already in the kitchen, flour dusting her hands as she rolled out biscuit dough with more force than strictly necessary. She'd barely slept, her mind churning with the strangeness of having another person in the house, of knowing that down the hall a dangerous man lay sleeping under her roof with her blessing and the law's sanction. The sound of boots on the wooden floor made her look up. Colt stood in the doorway, fully dressed despite the early hour, his dark hair still damp from washing at the pump outside. "Didn't mean to wake you," June said, brushing flour from her apron. "You didn't. I'm an early riser." He moved to the stove where coffee sat warming. "May I?" "Of course. You don't need to ask." He poured himself a cup, standing with his back to the wall, in that way she was beginning to recognize as habit. Always watching, always ready. "I thought I'd ride out this morning," Colt said. "Check the fence lines. Get a proper look at the property. Owen showed me some of it, but not all." June cut the biscuits with practiced efficiency and laid them on the baking sheet. "Take the North Ridge first. Owen said there were weak spots up there, places where the wire needed replacing. You want to come along?" The question surprised her. June looked up, meeting his winter sky eyes, and saw genuine inquiry there, not mere politeness. "I should," she heard herself say. "I need to learn the land properly if I'm going to help run it." Something that might have been approval flickered across Colt's features. "Get the biscuits in the oven. I'll saddle the horses." 30 minutes later they rode out together, the morning air crisp and sharp with the promise of approaching autumn. June had changed into one of Owen's old work shirts, modified to fit her smaller frame, and a split riding skirt that scandalized proper ladies but made riding infinitely more practical. Colt had noticed the outfit but said nothing, which June appreciated more than she'd expected. They rode in companionable silence, the horses' hooves creating a steady rhythm against the hard-packed earth. June watched the land unfold around them. Rolling prairie broken by stands of cottonwood, limestone outcroppings that caught the morning light, the distant blue smudge of mountains on the horizon. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It is." Colt's gaze swept the landscape with practiced efficiency, cataloging landmarks and potential threats in equal measure. "Good grazing land. Water access. Owen chose well. He inherited it from his uncle. I don't think he ever really loved it the way he should have." "And you?" Colt glanced at her. "Do you love it?" June considered the question honestly. "I'm learning to. When I married Owen, I thought I'd live in town, be a sheriff's wife with church socials and tea parties. This," she gestured at the vast prairie, "this wasn't what I expected. Expectations have a way of getting trampled by reality." "Speaking from experience?" "Always." They reached the North Ridge and Colt dismounted to examine the fence line. June watched him work, noting the careful way he tested each post, the methodical inspection of the wire. His hands were confident, competent, the hands of a man who'd done hard work and knew its value. "Here!" he called, pointing to a section where the wire sagged dangerously. "And here! This whole stretch needs replacing before winter, or you'll lose cattle to the ravine below." June dismounted and walked to where he stood. The ravine was steep, rocky, treacherous. "How much wire do we need?" "Couple 100 yards at least. Posts too. Some of these are rotted through." Colt pulled out a small notebook and pencil, making quick notes. "I'll make a list. We can order supplies when we go to town." "When we go to town," June repeated, and felt her stomach tighten. That should be interesting. Colt looked up from his notes, and understanding passed between them. The town would be watching, judging, whispering about the widow who'd remarried with unseemly haste. "Let them talk," Colt said quietly. "We know the truth. That's what matters." "Is it? Because sometimes I think the truth matters less than what people believe." "Maybe." He tucked the notebook away. "But we can't control what they believe. Only what we do." They continued riding, checking fence lines and water sources, and June found herself relaxing into Colt's presence. He wasn't chatty, far from it, but his silences felt comfortable rather than oppressive. When he did speak, his words carried weight, devoid of the meaningless pleasantries that so many men used to fill empty air. Around midday, they stopped by a creek to water the horses and eat the lunch June had packed. She spread a cloth on a flat rock and unpacked cold chicken, bread, and apples. "You didn't have to go to this trouble," Colt said, but he ate with obvious appreciation. Partners feed each other, June replied. That was the agreement. He smiled, actually smiled, and June realized it was the first time she'd seen genuine amusement on his face. It transformed him, softening the hard edges and revealing the man he might have been in a different life. What? She asked. You're not what I expected either. What did you expect? Colt chewed thoughtfully before answering. Someone fragile, someone who'd need constant protection and hand-holding. Owen talked about you like you were made of porcelain. June laughed, the sound startling them both. Owen wanted to believe I was delicate. It made him feel more heroic, I think. But I'm a farmer's daughter from Kansas. I can shoot, ride, and gut a chicken. Porcelain cracks too easy for frontier life. Good, Colt said. Porcelain wouldn't survive what's coming. The words hung heavy between them. June set down her half-eaten apple. What do you mean? Colt's expression darkened. The Draven gang didn't just kill Owen randomly. They were looking for something they think he had or knew about. Until they get it, they won't stop. But what could Owen possibly have that outlaws would want? Information, maybe. Evidence. Owen was investigating something before he died, spending late nights at his desk, riding out to meet people in secret. Colt met her eyes directly. Did he tell you anything? Mention any names or places? June tried to remember, sifting through the last weeks of Owen's life. He was quieter than usual, distracted. I thought he was just tired from the work, but now... She trailed off, memory stirring. Wait, there was something. About 2 weeks before he died, I found a letter on his desk. Just a glimpse before he put it away, but I saw the name Reddick. Judge Reddick? I think so. And there were numbers, large numbers, like money figures. Colt's jaw tightened. That's interesting. Why? Because Judge Reddick has been buying up land parcels all along Willow Creek. Worthless scrubland, everyone says, but if the railroad comes through like they're planning, that worthless land becomes valuable, June finished. Very valuable. But that's just business, isn't it? Not illegal? Depends on how he knew where the railroad was going. Inside information, bribes. That's a different story. Colt stood, brushing crumbs from his pants. We should head back. I want to check something in Owen's study. The ride home was faster, charged with new purpose. June felt pieces of a puzzle starting to connect. Owen's distraction, his murder, the forced marriage, Judge Reddick's involvement. Nothing felt random anymore. Back at the ranch, Colt headed straight for Owen's study while June put away the horses. When she joined him 20 minutes later, he had papers spread across the desk. Owen's journal open before him. Look at this, Colt said, pointing to a page dated a month before Owen's death. He was tracking land sales, noting patterns, and here, he flipped to another entry. He mentions meeting someone called the surveyor's assistant. Says the man was nervous, wanted protection in exchange for information. Information about what? The actual railroad route. Not the one they're telling the public, but the real one. Colt looked up, his expression grim. Owen figured out someone on the Railroad Commission was selling route information. Buyers could snap up cheap land, then make a fortune when the railroad came through. And Judge Reddick was one of those buyers, June said slowly. If Owen was going to expose him, he'd have every reason to want Owen dead. Colt closed the journal carefully. We can't prove it, not yet, but it fits. June sank into a chair, her mind reeling. The judge forced me to marry you. Why would he do that if he wanted to hurt me? Control, maybe. Keep you close, see what you know. Or maybe... Colt paused, something darker crossing his face. Maybe he thought a widow alone would be vulnerable. Easy to intimidate or remove. But a widow married to someone like me, someone with a reputation for violence, that's different. Harder to attack without consequences. So by marrying me, he inadvertently protected me? Ironic, isn't it? They stared at each other, and June felt the weight of dangerous knowledge settling on her shoulders. If they were right, if Judge Reddick was involved in Owen's murder, then simply knowing put them both at risk. What do we do? She asked. Nothing, yet. Colt gathered the papers carefully. We can't move against a judge without proof, real proof, not suspicions and patterns. We keep our heads down, run the ranch, and watch. Watch for what? Mistakes. Everyone makes them eventually. June wanted to argue, wanted to ride into town and confront Reddick herself, but she recognized the wisdom in Colt's caution. They were outgunned, outpositioned. Patience was their only weapon. That evening, they fell into a routine that would become familiar over the coming weeks. Colt worked outside until dusk, repairing what needed fixing, while June managed the house and the small vegetable garden she'd planted in spring. They ate supper together, conversation gradually becoming easier as the strangeness of their arrangement faded into daily life. June found herself watching Colt when he didn't notice, the way he moved with contained power, the care he took with even small tasks, the rare moments when his guard dropped, and she glimpsed something gentle beneath the hard exterior. It was dangerous, this watching. She reminded herself daily that theirs was a marriage of convenience, nothing more. But her heart had never been good at following rules. 2 weeks after the wedding, June made her first trip to town as Mrs. Mercer. She needed supplies, and Colt had insisted on accompanying her, driving the wagon while she sat beside him, spine straight despite her churning stomach. The whispers started before they even reached Morrison's general store. Women pulled their children closer as they passed. Men nodded curtly to Colt but wouldn't meet June's eyes. The message was clear. She'd broken some unwritten rule of widowhood, and Red Mesa wouldn't quickly forgive. Inside Morrison's, the store fell silent when they entered. Mr. Morrison himself came forward, his usually friendly face carefully neutral. Mrs. Carver, Mr. Mercer, what can I do for you? It's Mrs. Mercer now, June said clearly, refusing to let him erase her new status. And I need flour, sugar, coffee, and the items on this list. She handed over the paper, aware of Mrs. Hutchins and her circle of gossips watching from near the fabric table. Their whispers were just loud enough to carry. 3 weeks, Mrs. Hutchins said to her companion. 3 weeks from burying one husband to marrying another. Shameful. And him, the other woman replied. Everyone knows what he is, a killer. Owen Carver must be turning in his grave. June's hands clenched, but Colt's gentle touch on her elbow stopped her from turning around. Not worth it, he murmured. Let them talk. But Mrs. Hutchins wasn't finished. Of course, some women have no shame. I heard she was seen riding out alone with him before the wedding. Who knows what really happened between them while Owen was still alive? That was too much. June spun around, her temper finally breaking free. Excuse me, Mrs. Hutchins, but if you have something to say, perhaps you should say it to my face instead of whispering like a coward. The older woman's face flushed purple. I am simply expressing concern for propriety. You're spreading lies and gossip, June interrupted. My husband was murdered. Forgive me if I didn't wallow in grief long enough to satisfy your sense of propriety. I had a ranch to run and a future to secure. Would you prefer I'd lost everything and become dependent on charity? Your charity, perhaps? Well, No, I don't suppose you have. June's voice was cold as January snow. Needed to make a practical decision for survival. That takes experiencing hardship, which I doubt you've ever faced. The store had gone deathly quiet. Even Mr. Morrison had stopped wrapping her order to watch the confrontation. Mrs. Hutchins gathered herself with visible effort. Mark my words, nothing good comes from rushing into marriage with a man of violence. You'll learn that lesson soon enough, I expect. She swept out of the store with her companions in tow, leaving June shaking with anger and something uncomfortably close to tears. Colt's hand remained on her elbow, steady and warm. You handled that well, he said quietly. Did I? I just made an enemy of the most influential gossip in town. She was already your enemy. At least now she knows you won't be pushed around. Mr. Morrison cleared his throat awkwardly. Your order's ready, Mrs. Mercer. That'll be $8.40. June paid, and together she and Colt loaded the supplies into the wagon. As they prepared to leave, a familiar voice called out, June, Mr. Mercer, wait a moment. They turned to see Margaret Wells hurrying toward them, her young face flushed from running. The new school teacher had arrived in Red Mesa just a month before Owen's death, and June had liked her immediately, had sensed a kindred spirit in the educated young woman who'd come west seeking adventure. "I heard what happened in Morrison's," Margaret said breathlessly. "Mrs. Hutchkins is already spreading her version all over town. I wanted you to know that not everyone thinks like her." "That's kind of you to say, Miss Wells," June replied. "Margaret, please." The teacher glanced at Colt, curiosity clear in her intelligent eyes. "And I mean it. Some of us prefer to judge people by their actions rather than gossip. You've taken in a situation that would have crushed most women and found a way forward. That takes courage." June felt her throat tighten. "Thank you, Margaret. That means more than you know. If you need anything, friends, allies, someone to talk to, you know where to find me." Margaret squeezed June's hand briefly, nodded politely to Colt, and hurried back toward the schoolhouse. As they rode home, June found herself blinking back tears, not of sadness, but of relief. One friendly voice in a chorus of condemnation felt like salvation. "She's right, you know," Colt said after a long silence. "What you're doing takes courage." "What am I doing? Surviving?" "Surviving with dignity. That's harder than people think." June looked at him, at this man who'd become her husband and partner, and felt something shift in her chest, a warming, a softening she hadn't expected and wasn't sure she wanted. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" she said. "The widow who remarried too fast and the killer playing at respectability." "Former killer," Colt corrected, and she caught the hint of dark humor in his voice. "I'm reformed now, remember?" "Of course. How could I forget?" They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, and when they reached the ranch, they worked together to unload the supplies with the easy coordination of people who'd begun to know each other's rhythms. That night, as June prepared for bed, she heard raised voices outside. Moving to the window, she saw Colt standing near the barn, facing 3 men on horseback. Even from this distance, she recognized Big Jim Sawyer and his usual companions, troublemakers who spent more time drinking than working. June grabbed Owen's rifle from beside her bed and hurried downstairs, arriving just as the confrontation escalated. "Told you to stay away from here, Danner," Big Jim was saying, his words slurred with whiskey. "This is decent folks' land. We don't want your kind polluting it." "You're drunk, Jim," Colt said calmly. "Go sleep it off before you do something stupid." "Stupid? I'll show you stupid." Big Jim's hand moved toward his gun. "Don't." Colt's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. "You're outmatched, drunk, and trespassing. Leave now, while you still can." "Or what? You'll kill us like you killed all those others? Like maybe you killed the sheriff?" June had heard enough. She stepped out onto the porch, rifle raised and aimed. "Or I'll shoot you myself for threatening my husband on my property. Your choice, Jim." All 3 men turned to stare at her. Big Jim's face went from red to purple. "You're taking his side? Owen's barely cold in his grave, and Owen's dead," June said flatly, "and Colt is my husband. Those are the facts. Now get off my land before I add more facts to that list." For a tense moment, the standoff held. Then Big Jim spat in the dirt, wheeled his horse around, and galloped off with his companions following. Colt waited until they disappeared into the darkness before turning to June. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." June lowered the rifle, suddenly aware that her hands were shaking. "They had no right." "June." Colt climbed the porch steps and gently took the rifle from her trembling hands. "It's all right. They're gone." "I was so angry," she whispered. "They called you a killer, implied you murdered Owen, and all I could think was, how dare they? How dare they say those things?" She stopped, horrified by what she'd almost revealed. When had Colt's reputation become something worth defending? When had his honor become hers to protect? "Thank you," Colt said quietly, "for standing with me. Not many people have done that." Their eyes met in the lamplight spilling from the house, and June felt the air between them change, charged with something neither had acknowledged until now. "We're partners," she managed. "That's what partners do." "Is that all we are?" The question was soft, almost hesitant. "Partners?" June's breath caught. This was the moment to retreat, to reinforce the boundaries they'd established, to remember that theirs was a marriage of convenience and nothing more. "I don't know," she heard herself say instead. "What else could we be?" Colt reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His calloused fingers brushed her cheek, and June felt that touch like lightning. I don't know either, he admitted. But I think we're already more than we're admitting. June knew she should step back, go inside, preserve what remained of their careful arrangement. But standing there in the darkness, with Colt's hand still lingering near her face, she couldn't make herself move. This is dangerous, she whispered. I know. We agreed. I know that too. Then why? Because agreements don't account for this. His thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. For you being brave and sharp-tongued and nothing like I expected. For me wanting to protect you not because I promised Owen, but because I can't imagine not protecting you. June's heart hammered against her ribs. Colt, whatever she'd been about to say dissolved when he leaned down and kissed her, softly, carefully, as if she were something precious that might break. It was nothing like the chaste kiss Owen had given her on their wedding day, nothing like the perfunctory affection of her first marriage. This was want and need and possibility, all wrapped in the gentle pressure of lips that knew how to be tender despite all the violence they'd witnessed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, June felt the world had tilted on its axis. I'm sorry, Colt said hoarsely. I shouldn't have. Don't. June pressed her fingers to his lips. Don't apologize for the first real thing between us. But we agreed. I know what we agreed, and I'm saying maybe we were wrong. They stood there on the porch, the prairie night vast and wild around them, and June felt everything she'd carefully constructed beginning to crumble. She'd thought she could marry for convenience, maintain emotional distance, keep her heart safely locked away. She'd been fooling herself. What do we do now? Colt asked, voicing the question they both faced. June took his hand, feeling the calluses, the strength, the gentleness that lurked beneath his dangerous exterior. We take it one day at a time. We're honest with each other. We see where this leads. It might lead nowhere good. Your past doesn't define your future. Only your choices do. June squeezed his hand. And right now, you're choosing to be a good man. That's what I see. That's who you are. Colt pulled her close then, wrapping his arms around her in an embrace that felt like coming home. June rested her head against his chest, hearing his heart beat strong and steady beneath her ear. They stood like that for a long moment, two people who'd married as strangers beginning to discover they might be something more. The risks were enormous, scandal, danger, heartbreak all waited in the wings. But standing there in Colt's arms, June found she was willing to face those risks. Because somewhere between saying their vows and this moment, between partnership and protection, between practical arrangement and genuine feeling, June Mercer had committed the most dangerous act of all. She'd started to fall in love with her husband. The morning after their kiss found June in the kitchen before dawn, unable to sleep for the thoughts churning through her mind. She'd crossed a line last night, acknowledged feelings she'd sworn didn't exist, and now the world felt different somehow, sharper, more vivid, charged with possibilities both thrilling and terrifying. Colt appeared in the doorway as the first pale light touched the eastern sky, and their eyes met with an awareness that hadn't existed before. He crossed the kitchen slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wanted, but June held her ground as he stopped inches away. I didn't sleep much, he admitted. Neither did I. Regrets? June considered the question honestly. Fear, maybe, but not regret. Fear of what? Of wanting something I might lose, of opening my heart again after... She stopped, struggling for words. Owen and I, we were never what people thought. We were companions, partners of a sort, but there was no passion, no fire. I told myself that was enough, that quiet companionship was all I needed. But now you know different, Colt finished quietly. Because this thing between us, it's not quiet. No, June agreed. It's anything but quiet. He reached out and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I don't know how to do this, June. How to be what you need. I've spent my whole life alone, trusting no one, keeping everyone at arm's length. You're asking me to unlearn everything that's kept me alive. I'm not asking you to be anything but yourself. Just let me in. Let me see the man behind the scars and the silence. Colt pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face. You already see too much. That's what scares me. Good. Be scared with me. We'll figure it out together. He kissed her then, deeper than last night, with less hesitation and more hunger. June melted into him, her hand sliding up his chest to loop around his neck. The kiss tasted like coffee and possibility, like taking a leap into unknown territory and trusting someone would catch you. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Colt rested his forehead against hers. We should probably talk about what this means. It means we're more than partners now, June said. It means I want you to move into my room, our room, and stop pretending this is just a business arrangement. June, unless you don't want that. She pulled back slightly to meet his eyes. If you need more time, if you're not ready. I want it, Colt interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. God help me. I want it more than I've wanted anything in years. But you need to understand what you're taking on. My past isn't just going to disappear because we've developed feelings. Men I rode with, things I've done, they're all still out there waiting to catch up. Then we face them together. It's not that simple. It never is. June touched his face gently. But I'd rather face danger with you than safety without you. Is that foolish? Probably. But Colt was smiling as he said it, that rare expression that transformed his entire face. We're both fools then. They spent that morning working side by side with a new ease, the physical attraction between them acknowledged, but not acted upon in the bright light of day. There would be time for that later, June thought. Time to explore this connection, to learn each other's bodies as they were learning each other's hearts. But first, they had a ranch to run. Around midday, a rider appeared on the horizon, young, riding hard, dust trailing behind his horse. June and Colt exchanged glances, both instantly wary. The boy pulled up at the gate, his face flushed and frightened. June recognized him as Tommy Henderson, the storekeeper's son, barely 14. Mr. Mercer, Mrs. Mercer, Tommy gasped. You gotta come quick. There's trouble in town. Luke Draven and his gang just rode in. June's blood turned to ice. The Draven gang, the men who'd murdered Owen. How many? Colt's voice was deadly calm. 5, maybe 6. They're at the Red Dog Saloon, asking questions about you, Mr. Mercer, saying they got business with you. Colt's jaw tightened. Get inside, June. No. June was already moving toward the house. If they're asking about you, I'm coming too. June, don't argue with me on this. She emerged moments later with Owen's gun belt, which she strapped around her waist with practiced efficiency. They killed my husband. I have a right to face them. Colt looked like he wanted to protest, but something in June's expression stopped him. Instead, he nodded grimly. You stay behind me. If shooting starts, you get to cover. Understood? Understood. They rode to town at a hard gallop, Tommy Henderson racing ahead to warn the others. By the time they arrived, Red Mesa's main street was eerily quiet, windows shuttered, doors locked. Only the horses tied outside the Red Dog Saloon indicated where the Draven gang had holed up. Colt dismounted, his movements precise and controlled. June saw him check his pistol, settle the gun belt more comfortably on his hips, and transform before her eyes into something harder, more dangerous. The gunfighter he'd been before Red Mesa. Stay here, he said. Colt, please, June, for me, stay here. The vulnerability in his voice broke through her determination. June nodded, though every instinct screamed to follow him. She watched as Colt walked toward the saloon, his gait unhurried but purposeful, a man walking into danger with his eyes wide open. The saloon doors swung open before he reached them, and Luke Draven stepped out into the afternoon sunlight. June had never seen the outlaw leader before, but she knew him instantly, something in the predatory way he moved, the cold calculation in his eyes. Colt Mercer, Draven called out, his voice carrying down the empty street. Heard you went respectable. Got yourself married to a sheriff's widow. That's rich. Luke. Colt stopped about 20 feet away, his hand hovering near his gun. You're a long way from Texas. Following opportunities. You know how it is. Draven's smile was all teeth, no warmth. Or maybe you've forgotten, playing house with your pretty little wife. What do you want? What I've always wanted. What you owe me from Laredo. You cut out before the final split, Colt. Took your share and ran. Some might call that stealing. Some might call it survival. The Rangers had us surrounded. Anyone with half a brain could see it was a massacre waiting to happen. But you got out clean while the rest of us had to shoot our way through. Draven stepped further into the street, his hand also near his gun. You owe me a debt, Mercer. One way or another, I aim to collect. June's hand tightened on her rifle as more men emerged from the saloon. 5 outlaws, all armed, all watching Colt with varying degrees of hostility. The odds were terrible. I don't owe you anything, Luke. I rode with you, did my share of the work, took my risks same as everyone. What happened in Laredo wasn't my fault. No. Then whose fault was it that a little girl died in the street? Whose bullet found her? The words hit Colt like a physical blow. June saw him flinch, saw the pain cross his face before his mask slammed back into place. That girl's death is on all of us, Colt said quietly. Every man who rode into that town looking for easy money. I carry that weight every day, Luke, but I'm not paying you blood money for my guilt. Noble words. Draven's hand shifted closer to his gun. But I didn't come here for a philosophical discussion. I came for what's mine. And what's that? Your gun. One last job. There's a bank in Silver Creek. Easy pickings. You help us take it, we call your debt paid. You refuse? Draven shrugged. Well, accidents happen, especially to pretty widows living all alone on isolated ranches. June felt rage ignite in her chest. Before she could think better of it, she was walking forward, rifle raised, fury overriding fear. You threatening me, Draven? She called out. Every head turned toward her. Colt's face went pale with alarm. June, get back. No! She stopped beside Colt, rifle aimed squarely at Draven's chest. I want to hear him say it. Are you threatening me on the main street of Red Mesa in broad daylight? Draven's eyes narrowed, reassessing. You must be the widow. You got a death wish, woman, stepping into men's business. This became my business when you killed my husband. Sheriff Carver was investigating something, wasn't he? Something that led him to that road where your gang ambushed him. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Because I think you do. I think someone paid you to kill Owen, and I think I know who. June was bluffing, gambling that her suspicions about Judge Reddick were right, hoping to shake something loose. Draven's expression flickered, surprise, calculation, something that looked almost like respect. You're smarter than you look, Mrs. Mercer, but being smart won't keep you alive if you keep asking questions. Is that another threat? That's a promise. Colt shifted slightly, positioning himself between June and Draven. You've delivered your message, Luke. Now ride out before this gets ugly. Or what? You'll draw on all 6 of us? Even you aren't that fast, Mercer. Maybe not. Colt's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. But I'll drop you first, Luke. That's a guarantee. And I'm betting your boys won't stick around once their leader's dead. Tension crackled through the air like lightning before a storm. June's finger tightened on the trigger, her heart hammering so hard she could barely breathe. This was it. The moment everything could end in blood and gunfire. Then a new voice cut through the standoff. That's enough. Marshal Tully stepped out from behind the general store, shotgun raised, 2 deputies flanking him with rifles. You boys want to shoot it out? You'll do it somewhere else. Not on my street. Draven's eyes flickered between Colt, June, and the lawmen. The odds had shifted. This isn't over, Mercer, he said finally. You got 1 week to think about my offer. After that, I stop asking nice. Get out of my town, Draven, Marshal Tully ordered. You and your men. Now. For a tense moment, June thought Draven might refuse, might decide the bloodshed was worth it. Then he smiled that cold, predatory smile and tipped his hat mockingly. Marshal, Mrs. Mercer, enjoy your wedded bliss while it lasts. Something tells me it won't be long. The gang mounted up and rode out slowly, making a show of their lack of fear. June didn't lower her rifle until they disappeared over the ridge. You two all right? Marshal Tully approached, his weathered face creased with concern. We're fine, Colt said, though his hand was still on his gun. Thank you for the intervention. Don't thank me yet. We need to talk, all 3 of us. about what the hell is really going on here. They ended up in Marshal Tully's office, a cramped room that smelled of old coffee and tobacco. The marshal poured them each a shot of whiskey, which June drank gratefully despite the burn. "Start talking," Tully said, settling behind his desk. "And don't leave anything out." June and Colt exchanged glances. How much should they reveal? How much could they trust the marshal? Colt made the decision. Owen was investigating corruption, land fraud, bribery, possibly involving people in positions of power. He had evidence or was close to getting it when the Draven gang killed him. "You have proof of this?" Owen's journal, some correspondence, nothing concrete enough to bring charges, but enough to see the pattern. Tully drummed his fingers on the desk. "And you think whoever Owen was investigating hired Draven to kill him?" "It fits," June said. "And now Draven's trying to pressure Colt into helping with another job. Maybe to keep him complicit. Maybe just to neutralize the threat we pose." "What threat? You just said you don't have proof." "We don't, but they don't know that." June leaned forward. "Marshal, Owen trusted you. He worked with you for 8 years. If there's anyone in this town we can trust, it's you." Something shifted in Tully's expression, pain perhaps, or guilt. "Owen did trust me. Came to me about 2 weeks before he died, said he'd uncovered something big, needed time to gather evidence before going public. I told him to be careful, to watch his back." The marshal's voice roughened. "I should have done more. Should have insisted on helping, providing protection. Instead, I let him ride out alone and—" "You couldn't have known," Colt said quietly. "Couldn't I? Owen was spooked, kept looking over his shoulder. I knew something was wrong, and I did nothing." "You're doing something now," June pointed out. "You ran off the Draven gang. That took courage." "Or stupidity." Tully managed a grim smile. "You two have stirred up a hornet's nest. If there really is corruption at high levels, exposing it will make powerful enemies." "We're already enemies with them," Colt said. "Might as well make it official." "Then we do this smart, quietly. No more confrontations on Main Street." Tully pulled out a ledger. "I'll start asking questions, checking land records, following the money trail. You two keep your heads down, act normal, don't give anyone reason to think you're investigating." "While Draven's out there threatening us?" June shook her head. "We can't just wait for him to attack." "You can, and you will. Because charging in without preparation is how good people end up dead." Tully fixed them both with a hard stare. "Owen learned that lesson. Don't make me bury you two as well." They rode back to the ranch in silence, the weight of danger pressing down on them. The sun was setting, painting the prairie in shades of gold and crimson, beautiful and indifferent to human struggles. "I'm sorry," Colt said as they approached the house. "For what?" "For bringing this to your door, Draven, the danger, all of it. If I'd refused Owen's request, if I'd left town after he died, then I'd have lost the ranch. And Draven would have come after me anyway." June reined in her horse and reached over to touch Colt's arm. "This isn't your fault. You didn't kill Owen. You didn't create the corruption. You're just trying to survive, same as me." "Surviving isn't enough anymore." Colt met her eyes, and June saw something fierce burning there. "I want to live, June. Really live. Build something worth protecting. With you. Then we fight for it. Together." They dismounted and put the horses away, working in comfortable synchronization. Inside, June started supper while Colt built up the fire against the evening chill. The domesticity of it all felt surreal after the afternoon's violence. "Colt," June said as they ate, "what Draven said about Laredo, about the girl, you want to know if it's true." His voice was flat, carefully empty. "I want to know what haunts you." He was quiet for so long June thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his fork and met her eyes. Her name was Mary. At least that's what her mother screamed when she fell. She was maybe 6 years old, caught in the crossfire when the Rangers ambushed us. "I didn't fire the shot that killed her. That was one of the Rangers shooting wild. But I was there. I was part of the reason that child was in danger." Colt's hands clenched into fists. "I can still see her face, June. Still hear her mother's screams. That's what made me leave. Made me realize I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. June reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. That's called a conscience, Colt. That's called being human. Human? His laugh was bitter. Humans don't do what I've done. Yes, they do. Good and terrible things, sometimes in the same day. The difference is whether they learn from it, whether they try to change. I'm trying. God knows I'm trying, but sometimes I wonder if people like me deserve redemption. Everyone deserves the chance to be better than their worst day. June squeezed his hand. You're not that man anymore. The man who left Laredo in horror at what he'd participated in, who came to Red Mesa looking for honest work, who promised a dying friend to protect his widow. That's who you are now. Colt turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. You have more faith in me than I deserve. Maybe. Or maybe I just see you more clearly than you see yourself. After supper, they sat on the porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. June leaned against Colt's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Me too. What happens if Draven comes back, if he makes good on his threats? We fight, we survive, same as always. Colt's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her closer. But this time we don't fight alone. Promise me something. Anything. Promise you won't sacrifice yourself for me. Don't do something noble and stupid, like riding off to face Draven alone to keep me safe. Colt was quiet, and June pulled back to look at him. I mean it, Colt. We're partners. That means we face danger together or not at all. You're asking me not to protect you. I'm asking you to trust me to protect myself, and to value your life as much as you value mine. He cupped her face with both hands, his expression intense. My life has value because you're in it, June. Before you, I was just going through the motions, waiting for the bullet with my name on it. You gave me a reason to want tomorrow. Then stay alive for all those tomorrows. With me. I'll try. He kissed her softly. I'll try my damnedest. They stayed on the porch until the cold drove them inside. In the hallway between their rooms, they paused, the question hanging unspoken between them. Your room or mine? June asked, her heart hammering. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Colt followed her into the room she'd once shared with Owen, and if he felt strange about that, he didn't mention it. June lit the lamp, then turned to face him, suddenly nervous. I don't know how to do this, she confessed. Owen and I, it was always very perfunctory, very quick. I don't know what I'm doing. Colt crossed to her slowly, gathering her hands in his. Then we'll learn together. There's no rush, June. We have all night. We have all the nights ahead of us. He kissed her then, deep and slow, and June felt herself melting into him. His hands were gentle as they worked the buttons of her dress, patient as he helped her out of the layers of fabric. When she stood before him in just her chemise, vulnerable and exposed, he looked at her like she was something precious. You're beautiful, he said simply. June helped him with his own clothes, fingers fumbling with buttons and buckles, revealing the scars she'd glimpsed before. The map of violence written on his skin. She traced them gently, each mark a story she wanted to know. Does it bother you? Colt asked. All the scars? No, they're part of you, part of your story. She kissed a particularly vicious mark across his ribs. They show you survived. What followed was tender and fumbling and perfect in its imperfection. Colt was patient, attentive, making sure June found pleasure even when his own control threatened to snap. When they finally came together, it felt like more than just physical joining. It felt like two souls recognizing each other, two broken people finding wholeness in their brokenness. Afterward, they lay tangled together, June's head on Colt's chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. That was... June started. Yeah, Colt agreed, understanding without her finishing. Owen and I never... I know. How do you know? Because I can tell. You respond like someone discovering something new. He kissed the top of her head. I'm glad I could give you that. June propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. It wasn't just physical, though, was it? It felt like more. It was more. It was everything. Colt's hand came up to cup her face. I love you, June. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you faced down Big Jim with that rifle. Maybe when you stood up to Mrs. Hutchkins. Maybe it's been growing since the day we married. But it's true. I love you. June felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too. God help me. I love you so much it terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? Because love means something to lose. And I've already lost so much. Hey. Colt pulled her back down against him, holding her tight. You're not going to lose me. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. Not with Draven out there, not with everything we're facing. Then I'll promise this. I'll fight like hell to come back to you. Every time, no matter what. June buried her face in his neck, breathing in the scent of him, soap and leather, and something uniquely Colt. That's all I can ask. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time since Owen's death, June's dreams were peaceful. She dreamed of a future, of mornings waking up beside Colt, of building a life together, of love that had started as convenience growing into something real and lasting. But even in dreams, danger lurked at the edges. Shadows that looked like Luke Draven, whispers that sounded like threats, the constant awareness that their happiness was fragile, bought with time they might not have. When morning came, June woke to find Colt already awake, watching her with an expression so tender it made her heart ache. "Good morning, wife," he said softly. "Good morning, husband." She stretched, wincing slightly at unfamiliar aches. "How long have you been awake?" "A while. I was watching you sleep, thinking about how lucky I am." "Lucky? We're facing outlaws and corruption and possible death. That's your definition of lucky? I'm in bed with a woman I love who loves me back. After the life I've lived, yeah, that's lucky." He kissed her gently. "Whatever comes, June, we had this. No one can take that away." June felt a chill despite his warmth. "Don't talk like that. Like you're saying goodbye." "I'm not. I'm just saying." A gunshot shattered the morning peace. They were both out of bed instantly, Colt grabbing his gun while June reached for her rifle. More shots rang out, coming from the direction of the barn. "Stay here," Colt ordered, pulling on his pants. "Like hell." June was already dressing with frantic speed. "We do this together, remember?" They burst out of the house to find the barn in flames, smoke billowing black against the dawn sky. The horses were screaming, trapped inside. "Get water," Colt yelled, running toward the barn. "I'll get the animals out." June's heart seized with fear. "It's too dangerous." But he was already gone, disappearing into the smoke. June ran for the pump, filling buckets with shaking hands, her mind screaming that this was Draven's work, that this was the threat made real. Colt emerged from the barn leading 2 panicked horses, his shirt already singed. "There's more inside. Keep the water coming." He went back in, and June wanted to scream at him to stop, to let the animals go, to save himself. But she knew he wouldn't, knew that this was who he was, a man who'd protect what mattered no matter the cost. She was throwing water on the flames when Marshal Tully and his deputies arrived, drawn by the smoke. They formed a bucket brigade, fighting the fire, while Colt made trip after trip into the burning structure. When he finally emerged with the last horse, his face was black with soot, his hands blistered. The barn was a total loss, but the animals were safe. "This was a message," Colt said grimly, staring at the smoldering ruins. Draven's way of saying time's running out. June wanted to cry, to rage, to do something with the fear churning in her gut. Instead, she took Colt's burned hands in hers and led him toward the house. "Let me tend these," she said quietly. As she cleaned and bandaged his burns, June felt her resolve harden into something sharp and dangerous. Draven had declared war. Fine. Then war he would get, but on their terms, in their time, with their choosing. She looked at Colt's soot-stained face and saw the same determination reflected there. They would fight. They would survive. And when the dust settled, the truth about Owen's death, about the corruption poisoning Red Mesa, would finally come to light, no matter what it cost. The ashes of the barn were still warm when Marshal Tully found the evidence. A whiskey bottle wedged between charred timbers, the glass cracked but intact, with a rag stuffed in the neck. The crude firebomb had been thrown from the ridge overlooking the ranch, designed to ignite fast and burn hot. "Professional work," Tully said grimly, turning the bottle over in his hands. "Draven's sending a message. He can reach you any time he wants." June watched from the porch where she'd insisted Colt sit while she rewrapped his burned hands with fresh bandages. The blisters were angry and red, but he'd refused to complain. His jaw set in that stubborn line she was learning meant he was in pain but wouldn't admit it. "The message received," Colt said flatly. "Question is, what do we do about it?" "You could leave." The marshal's suggestion hung heavy in the morning air. "Both of you. Sell the ranch, start over somewhere Draven can't find you." "Run, you mean?" June's voice was sharp as broken glass. "Let him win. Let whoever hired him to kill Owen get away with murder. Better than getting killed yourselves." "Is it?" June tied off the bandage with more force than necessary, making Colt wince. "Sorry, but no, Marshal, we're not running. This is our home, our land. We have a right to defend it." Tully sighed, looking every one of his 50-some years. "Your home won't matter much if you're dead, Mrs. Mercer." "Then help us make sure we're not." Colt stood, testing his bandaged hands. "You said you'd investigate the corruption. Have you found anything?" The marshal glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers, then lowered his voice. "I've been going through land records like I said. The pattern's there. Judge Reddick, Mayor Peterson, even some of the town council members have been buying parcels along Willow Creek. Worthless land on paper, but if the railroad comes through like the rumors say, they'll make a fortune," June finished. "But that's not illegal. Unethical maybe, but not criminal." "No, but if they had inside information from the Railroad Commission, if they bribed officials to get that information or to influence the route itself, that's fraud. That's corruption at a level that could bring down half the territorial government." Colt's expression darkened, and Owen was close to proving it. "I think so. I found some of his notes hidden in his old desk at the jail. He was tracking payments, matching dates, building a case. But he needed one more piece, direct evidence linking the payments to the railroad officials." "Did he get it?" June asked. "If he did, he hit it well. I've been through his office top to bottom and found nothing." June's mind raced. Owen had been methodical, careful. If he'd found evidence that dangerous, he wouldn't have kept it somewhere obvious. She thought about their house, about the places Owen spent time, about the barn, she said suddenly. Owen spent hours in the barn, said he liked the quiet for thinking. What if he hid something there? "The barn's gone, June," Colt reminded her gently. "The barn's gone, but the foundation isn't, and neither is the old root cellar underneath it." All three of them stared at each other as understanding dawned. The root cellar, half forgotten, rarely used since June had dug a newer one closer to the house. Owen could have hidden something there, somewhere the fire wouldn't touch. "Show me," Tully said. They picked through the smoking rubble carefully, watching for hot spots and weak boards. The entrance to the old root cellar was buried under charred timber, but with the three of them working together, they cleared it within an hour. The wooden doors were singed but intact. Colt wrenched them open, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. June fetched a lantern from the house, and together they climbed down into the cool, musty space. The cellar was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with stone walls and a dirt floor. Old preserves lined one wall, covered in dust and cobwebs. Nothing looked disturbed. "I don't see anything," Tully said, his disappointment evident. But June was thinking like Owen would have thought, careful, paranoid, always 3 steps ahead. She moved along the walls, pressing stones, checking for loose mortar. In the far corner, behind a stack of empty crates, her fingers found it, a stone that shifted when she pushed. "Here," she breathed. Colt helped her pull the stone free, revealing a hollow space behind it. Inside was a leather document wallet, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture. June's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were letters, bank drafts, and a detailed ledger in Owen's neat handwriting. As she scanned the contents, her breath caught. "He got it," she whispered. "Sheet it. Owen got the proof." The documents painted a damning picture. Judge Reddick and Mayor Peterson had been paying a railroad surveyor named Thomas Blackwell for advance information about the route. Blackwell's letters detailed meetings, payoffs, and explicit promises about where the tracks would go. More than that, There was evidence they'd bribed territorial officials to approve the route, funneling money through the intermediaries to hide the corruption. "This is enough to bring them all down," Tully said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Enough to see them hanged." "It's also enough to get us killed," Colt pointed out. "If they knew Owen had this, if they know we have it now, they don't know." June clutched the wallet to her chest. The barn burning was about intimidation, not searching. They think if we had evidence, we'd have used it already. "So we use it now." Tully reached for the wallet. "I'll take this to the territorial governor, get warrants issued." "And how long will that take?" Colt interrupted. "Days? Weeks? You think Draven's going to wait that long? You think Reddick won't notice you riding off to the Capitol with evidence?" "Then what do you suggest?" Colt's eyes were hard as winter ice. "We set a trap. We let them think we're vulnerable, beaten down by the fire. We let Draven come to us. And when he does, we're ready." "That's suicide," Tully protested. "Draven's got 5 men, maybe more. You can't fight them all." "We don't fight them. We capture them, get one to talk, to testify against whoever hired them." Colt looked at June. "It's risky, but it's our best shot at ending this." June knew he was right, hated that he was right. "How do we set the trap?" "We send word that I'm considering Draven's offer, that the barn fire convinced me and I'm willing to talk. We arrange a meeting here at the ranch, somewhere we control, somewhere we can turn the tables. And when they come in force to kill you both instead of talking?" Tully's skepticism was evident. "Then we make sure we're not alone." Colt turned to the marshal. "You deputize some men you trust, hide them around the property. When Draven shows, we have witnesses and reinforcements." It was a desperate plan, full of holes and contingent on everything going right. But June couldn't see a better option. They couldn't run, couldn't hide, couldn't wait for justice through official channels that might be as corrupt as the men they were fighting. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll send the message to Draven." "June, no. It has to be me. If you go into town, they'll suspect. But a widow visiting the general store, buying supplies to rebuild, that's natural. No one will question it." Colt looked like he wanted to argue, but June held his gaze steadily. They were partners. That meant trusting each other, even when it was hard. "All right," he said finally, "but you take the rifle and you're home before dark." "Deal." Tully left to start recruiting trusted deputies, taking the evidence wallet with him for safekeeping. June and Colt spent the afternoon preparing, checking weapons, planning positions, trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. That evening, June rode into Red Mesa with the setting sun painting the sky blood red. The town was quiet, most folks already home for supper. She tied her horse outside Morrison's general store and went inside, acutely aware of the weight of the pistol hidden in her skirt pocket. Mr. Morrison greeted her with cautious politeness. "Mrs. Mercer, heard about the fire? Terrible business." "Yes, it was. I need supplies, nails, timber, rope. We're going to rebuild." As Morrison gathered her order, June let her voice carry, knowing that in a small town, every word would be repeated by morning. "My husband is reconsidering some business opportunities. Seems the fire convinced him that sometimes you have to be practical rather than stubborn." Morrison's eyes sharpened with curiosity. "That's so." "That's so. If anyone comes asking about him, you can let them know he's willing to talk. Tomorrow night, at the ranch. He'll be alone. I'm staying with Margaret Wells in town for safety." The lie came smoothly, and June saw Morrison processing the information, already planning who he'd tell first. In a town this size, the gossip network was faster than telegraph. She paid for her supplies, loaded them into her wagon, and was preparing to leave when a shadow fell across her path. Luke Draven leaned against the hitching post, his smile cold in the fading light. "Mrs. Mercer, fancy meeting you here." June's hand drifted toward her pocket, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Mr. Draven, I heard you were still in the area." "Oh, I'm around, waiting for your husband to see sense." His eyes glittered with malice. "Shame about your barn. Accidents happen on isolated ranches. It wasn't an accident, and we both know it." "Do we?" Draven pushed off from the post, moving closer. "Prove it." June lifted her chin, refusing to show fear. "My husband wants to talk. Tomorrow night at the ranch. He's willing to discuss your proposal." Draven's eyebrows rose. "Is he now? That's a sudden change of heart." The fire helped him see reason. He's practical enough to know when he's outmatched. "Smart man, smarter than I gave him credit for." Draven studied her face. "And you'll be where during this conversation?" "Staying in town with a friend. I don't want to be anywhere near if things go badly." Wise woman. But there was suspicion in his eyes, a calculation that made June's skin crawl. "I'll think about it. Might be your husband and I have something to discuss after all." He tipped his hat mockingly and walked away, leaving June shaking with suppressed fear and adrenaline. She climbed into her wagon and drove out of town at a normal pace, though every instinct screamed to run. Colt was waiting at the ranch gate when she arrived, his relief palpable. "How did it go?" "I saw Draven, told him what we planned. He's suspicious, but I think he'll come." "Of course he's suspicious. It's too convenient." Colt helped her down from the wagon. "But greed will outweigh caution. He wants me for that bank job, wants the leverage I'd give him." That night, they made their preparations. Colt positioned rifles at strategic points around the property, checked sight lines, planned escape routes if everything went to hell. Marshal Tully arrived after dark with 4 deputies he swore were trustworthy, men who'd served with Owen, who wanted justice for their murdered sheriff. They hid in the barn ruins, in the hayloft of the smaller stable, behind the stone wall near the garden. When Draven came, he'd find himself in a kill box. If he came. "He'll come," Colt said quietly, reading June's thoughts as they stood together in the darkness. Men like Draven always think they're smarter than everyone else. He'll come because he can't resist. "And if he brings his whole gang? Then we fight, and we win, or we die trying." He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I love you, June. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know that. You gave me something I never thought I'd have, a reason to live instead of just survive." June felt tears prick her eyes. "Don't talk like that. Like you're saying goodbye." "I'm not. I'm saying in case. In case things go wrong, in case I don't get another chance, I need you to know you're everything to me." "You're everything to me, too." June kissed him fiercely, pouring all her love and fear into it. "So you damn well better survive tomorrow. We have a life to build, remember?" "I remember." They made love that night with desperate intensity, as if by joining their bodies they could somehow protect each other from what was coming. Afterward, June lay awake listening to Colt's breathing, memorizing the feel of him beside her, praying to a God she wasn't sure she believed in that tomorrow wouldn't be their last day together. Dawn came too quickly. Colt rose early, dressing in dark clothes that would blend with shadows. He checked his guns with practiced efficiency, loading and reloading until the movements were automatic. "You should go to town," he said, "like you told Draven. Stay with Margaret until this is over." "Absolutely not." "June, we're partners, remember? I'm not leaving you to face this alone." "It's too dangerous." "Then it's too dangerous for both of us." June pulled on her own dark clothes, strapped on Owen's gun belt. "I can shoot, I can fight, and I can watch your back. You need me." Colt looked like he wanted to argue, but something in June's expression stopped him. Instead, he pulled her close, holding tight. "You stay behind cover. You don't take unnecessary risks. If I tell you to run, you run. Agreed?" "Agreed," June lied, knowing she'd do no such thing if it meant leaving him behind. The day passed with agonizing slowness. The deputies remained hidden, silent, and invisible. June and Colt stayed in the house, watching the horizon, waiting. Sunset came and went. Full darkness fell, and still nothing. "Maybe he's not coming," June whispered. "He's coming. He's just being careful, making sure it's not a trap." Another hour crawled by, then another. June's nerves were stretched to breaking when Colt suddenly went rigid beside her. "There," he breathed, pointing to the ridge. "Movement." June strained her eyes and caught it. Shadows separating from shadows, the silhouettes of mounted men against the stars. 1, 2, 3. She counted 6 riders moving slowly down the slope toward the ranch. 6, Colt murmured. "That's all of them. Draven brought his whole gang. Confident, isn't he? Or cautious, 6 to 1 odds, even against me." Colt moved to the door. Remember, stay behind cover. Don't shoot unless you have a clear target, and for God's sake, don't try to be a hero. Same to you. The riders stopped about 50 yards from the house. Draven's voice carried through the darkness. Mercer, come on out. Let's talk this through like civilized men. Colt stepped onto the porch, hands visible and empty. I'm here, Luke. Like I said I'd be. So you are. And your pretty little wife? In town, like she said, this is between you and me. Draven laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. You really think I'm stupid enough to believe that? I saw her wagon here when we rode in. She's inside right now, probably with a rifle trained on me. Smart woman, Colt acknowledged. But she won't shoot unless you give her reason. We're here to talk, remember? Talk. Draven dismounted, his men following suit. Sure, let's talk. About how you owe me a debt and how you're finally going to pay it. They moved closer, spreading out in a semicircle, a tactical position that would be devastating if shooting started. June's heart hammered as she tracked them through the window, rifle ready. I'll do your bank job, Colt said. One last ride, like old times. Then we're square. Are we? Because I'm thinking maybe one job isn't enough. Maybe you work for me permanent-like. I could use someone with your skills. That wasn't the deal. Deals change. Circumstances change. Draven's hand drifted toward his gun. You're a wanted man, Mercer. Did you know that? Murder warrant from Laredo finally caught up. Seems the Rangers remember you after all. June's blood turned to ice. A warrant meant Colt could be arrested, hanged legally. Draven must have pulled strings, called in favors to manufacture evidence. That warrant's a lie, Colt said, his voice steady despite the trap closing around him. Maybe so, but it's legal, signed by a territorial judge. Funny thing, though, I happen to have friends who could make that warrant disappear. For the right price. What price? You work for me. Permanent. And your lovely wife's ranch becomes a safe haven for my operations. We use it as a base, run guns and stolen goods through here, maybe stash some bank proceeds in that nice root cellar you've got. So that was the real play. Draven didn't just want Colt. He wanted the ranch. Wanted a legitimate-looking operation to hide his criminal enterprise. And if I refuse, Colt asked, then I take you in on that warrant, collect the reward money, and your widow becomes a widow twice over. Then I make her the same offer without you around to complicate things. You son of a... Colt's hand flashed toward his gun, but Draven was ready. He dove sideways as his men drew their weapons, and suddenly the night exploded with gunfire. June fired through the window, her shot taking down the outlaw nearest to Colt. The deputies emerged from hiding, their rifles barking in the darkness. Draven's men scattered, returning fire, and chaos reigned. Colt rolled behind the water trough, his pistol spitting flame. June saw one of Draven's men go down, then another. But there were still too many, and they had cover now behind the ruins of the barn. "June, get down!" Colt shouted as bullets splintered the window frame above her head. She ducked, then popped up in a different window, firing at a shape moving through the shadows. The man screamed and fell. Marshal Tully and his deputies were closing in from three sides, their crossfire devastating. But Draven was fighting back with desperate fury, his remaining men shooting with the accuracy of professionals. June saw Colt take a round in the shoulder, saw him spin and go down behind the trough. Her heart stopped. "Colt!" Without thinking, she ran out of the house, rifle forgotten, pistol in hand. She fired at Draven's position, providing covering fire as she raced to Colt's side. "I'm all right," he gasped, blood spreading across his shirt. "Flesh wound. Get back to cover." A deputy cried out and fell. Then another. Draven's gang was better than expected, and the fight was turning. June helped Colt to his feet, half dragging him toward the house. A bullet whined past her ear, so close she felt the heat. Another kicked up dirt at her feet. They made it to the porch just as Draven himself appeared from the shadows, gun leveled at Colt's head. "End of the line, Mercer," he snarled. June didn't hesitate. She raised her pistol and fired 3 times in rapid succession. The first shot went wide, but the second and third found their mark. Draven staggered, looking down at the spreading red stains on his chest with something like surprise. "You," he started, then crumpled to the ground. The remaining outlaws, seeing their leader fall, broke and ran. Tully's deputies gave chase, gunfire echoing into the distance. Within minutes, it was over. June stood frozen, staring at Draven's body, her pistol still raised. She'd killed a man. Actually killed someone. The reality of it crashed over her like a wave. "June!" Colt's voice cut through her shock. "June, look at me." She turned to find him leaning against the porch post, his face pale but his eyes clear. "You saved my life," he said simply. "I killed him." Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "I killed a man. You saved me. Saved all of us." Colt reached for her, pulling her close despite his wound. "You did what you had to do." Marshal Tully emerged from the darkness, breathing hard. "We got 3 of them alive. They're already talking, already naming names. Reddick, Peterson, half the town council. It's going to be a bloodbath when this all comes out." "Good," June said, and was surprised by the steel in her own voice. "Let it be a bloodbath. Owen deserves justice." "He's getting it, thanks to you two." Tully looked at Draven's body. "This one won't be mourned. The world's better off without him." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Dr. Garrett was summoned to tend Colt's wound and the injured deputies. The surviving outlaws were taken into custody, their confessions recorded. As dawn broke, riders left for the territorial capital carrying evidence and witness statements that would bring down Red Mesa's corrupt elite. June sat on the porch watching the sunrise, Colt beside her with his shoulder freshly bandaged. She'd washed the blood from her hands, but she could still feel its phantom weight. "How do you live with it?" she asked quietly. "The killing? You remember why you did it. You remember who you saved." Colt took her hand. "You didn't kill Draven because you wanted to. You killed him because he was going to kill me, kill others. That's not murder, June. That's survival. That's protection." "Does it get easier?" "No, but it gets manageable, and you won't do it alone. I'll be here, helping you through it." June leaned her head on his good shoulder, exhausted beyond measure, but also strangely at peace. They'd survived. They'd won. The corruption would be exposed, Owen would get justice, and she and Colt could finally build the life they'd been fighting for. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too." The sun rose higher, burning away the shadows, and June Mercer watched it come with her husband beside her, ready to face whatever new day would bring. The town meeting was called for Tuesday morning, 3 days after the shootout that left Luke Draven dead and his surviving gang members in custody. Judge Reddick sat at the head table in the courthouse, his face the color of old parchment, while Mayor Peterson fidgeted beside him like a man awaiting execution. Marshal Tully stood near the door, rifle cradled in his arms, making it clear that no one was leaving until justice had been served. June sat in the front row with Colt beside her, his arm still in a sling from the shoulder wound. The courtroom was packed. Seemed like every soul in Red Mesa had turned out to witness the reckoning. "This proceeding is a farce," Judge Reddick blustered, though his voice lacked its usual authority. "I am a duly appointed territorial judge. You cannot simply accuse me of conspiracy to commit murder," Marshal Tully interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Fraud, bribery, corruption of office? Because that's exactly what we're doing, Your Honor. And we have the evidence to prove it." He nodded to his deputy, who brought forward the leather wallet June had found in the root cellar. The documents were spread across the table for all to see. Letters, bank drafts, Owen's meticulous ledger tracking payments, and schemes. Sheriff Carver spent months investigating a land fraud scheme, Tully continued. He discovered that certain prominent citizens were receiving advance information about the railroad route from a surveyor named Thomas Blackwell. They used this information to purchase worthless land that would become valuable once the railroad came through. When Sheriff Carver got too close to exposing this conspiracy, he was murdered. The Draven gang was hired to do the killing, paid with money traced back to accounts controlled by Judge Reddick and Mayor Peterson. A murmur ran through the crowd. Miss Hutchkins gasped audibly, her hand flying to her throat. "That's a lie," Reddick snarled. "You have no proof connecting us to Carver's death." "Actually, we do." Tully pulled out a sheet of paper. "This is a signed confession from Martin Cross, one of Draven's surviving men. He states explicitly that Luke Draven was paid $5,000 to eliminate Sheriff Carver. The payment came through an intermediary, but Cross witnessed the transaction and can identify the man who delivered the money, your clerk, Judge Reddick, the same clerk who's currently in custody and singing like a canary to save his own neck. Reddick's face went from pale to purple. This is outrageous. You demand nothing. Territorial Governor William Hayes stepped forward from where he'd been standing at the back of the room. He'd arrived the previous evening after receiving Tully's urgent telegram, and his presence carried the weight of official authority. Judge Reddick, Mayor Peterson, you are both under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, bribery, and corruption of office. You will be transported to the territorial capital to stand trial. You can't do this, Peterson whimpered. We're pillars of this community. You're criminals, June said, rising to her feet. Every eye in the room turned to her. You murdered my husband because he was an honest man doing his job. You tried to intimidate me, control me, threaten the man I married. Well, you failed. Owen's dead, but his work lives on. Justice lives on. Her voice rang through the courthouse, clear and strong. Colt stood beside her, his good hand finding hers, their fingers intertwining. Mrs. Mercer is right, Governor Hayes said. This corruption ends today. Red Mesa deserves better than leaders who put profit over law, who hire killers to silence honest lawmen. He turned to the crowd. I'm appointing Marshal Tully as acting sheriff until proper elections can be held. He'll work with a territorial investigator to root out any remaining corruption in this town. Anyone else involved in this scheme would be wise to come forward now, before we dig deeper. The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly, 3 town council members stood, Hanson, the banker, Wright, the land office clerk, and Sullivan, who owned the lumber mill. Their faces were ashen with guilt and fear. We didn't know about the murder, Hanson said hoarsely. We swear we didn't. We only knew about the land deals, the advance information. When Owen died, we thought it was just bad luck, the Draven gang's random violence. Nothing about it was random, Tully said coldly. But your cooperation is noted. You'll still face charges, but honesty now might earn leniency later. As the arrest proceeded and the guilty were led away in chains, June felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Owen's murder wouldn't bring him back, but at least his killers would face justice. The corruption that had poisoned Red Mesa would be cut out like a cancer. Outside the courthouse, Margaret Wells approached them with tears in her eyes. I can't believe it. Judge Reddick, the mayor. I taught their children. I trusted them. That's what made them dangerous, Colt said quietly. Wolves in sheep's clothing. What happens now? Margaret asked. Now we rebuild, June said. The town, our lives, everything they tried to destroy. Over the following weeks, Red Mesa transformed. Governor Hayes appointed an interim judge and mayor, both outsiders with no ties to the corruption. Marshal Tully officially became Sheriff Tully, winning a special election by a landslide. The 3 council members who'd confessed were given reduced sentences in exchange for testimony, while Reddick and Peterson awaited trial in the territorial prison. June and Colt threw themselves into rebuilding the barn, working side by side with neighbors who'd previously shunned them but now offered help with something like shame in their eyes. Even Big Jim Sawyer showed up one morning, hat in hand, mumbling an apology for his previous behavior. Heard what you did, he said gruffly to June. Took down Draven yourself. That takes guts. I was wrong about you, about both of you. Apology accepted, June said simply, because holding grudges took energy she didn't have. The new barn rose from the ashes of the old one, bigger and better built. On the day they raised the roof beam, half the town turned out to help, bringing food and drink and the kind of community spirit June had thought lost forever. Mrs. Hutchkins even approached her at the celebration, though the older woman looked like she'd swallowed something sour. I may have been hasty in my judgment, she said stiffly. You've proven yourself a woman of courage and integrity. Thank you, Mrs. Hutchkins. June managed not to smile at how much that admission must have cost. I appreciate you saying so. As summer faded into autumn, life settled into a new rhythm. The ranch prospered with both June and Colt working it together. She'd learned more about cattle and land management in 3 months than she'd known in 3 years of marriage to Owen. Colt was a patient teacher, and she was an eager student. Their love deepened too, growing from the desperate passion of those early days into something steadier and more enduring. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's needs. Colt's nightmares about Laredo gradually lessened, while June found that the memory of killing Draven no longer woke her in cold sweats. "You're healing," Colt observed one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. "We both are," June corrected, leaning into his warmth. "Together." "Together," he agreed, kissing the top of her head. It was Margaret Wells who brought them the news that would change everything once more. She arrived on a crisp October morning, her buggy raising dust on the newly repaired road to the ranch. "June! Colt!" she called, her face flushed with excitement. "You'll never believe what's happened." They met her at the door, and Margaret practically dragged them inside. "The orphanage in Copper Ridge, it burned down last week. Terrible fire. Most of the children were evacuated safely, but they need homes. Sheriff Tully is helping coordinate placements, and I immediately thought of you two." June felt her heart skip. "You want us to take in orphans?" "One in particular. His name is Finn Abbott. He's 10 years old, smart as a whip, but he's had a hard life. The orphanage wasn't kind to him. I've seen the marks, June. He needs a real home, a family who will love him and protect him." June looked at Colt, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. They'd never discussed children, had been too focused on survival and rebuilding to think about the future in those terms. "I don't know anything about raising children," Colt said slowly. "Neither did I before I started teaching." Margaret's expression softened. "But you know about protection, about giving someone a second chance. That's what Finn needs. Someone who understands that the past doesn't have to define the future." The words hit home. June saw Colt's face change, saw understanding dawn. "Can we meet him?" June asked. "He's at the schoolhouse now. I brought him with me, hoping you'd say yes." They walked to town together, June's nerves jangling with every step. What did she know about motherhood? She'd never even held a baby, had resigned herself years ago to remaining childless in her marriage to Owen. But this was different. This was a boy who needed them, who'd suffered like they'd suffered, who deserved the same second chance they'd been given. Finn Abbott sat on the schoolhouse steps, a skinny child with unruly brown hair and eyes too old for his young face. He looked up as they approached, his expression guarded, wary. June recognized that look. It was the same one Colt had worn when she'd first met him, the look of someone who'd learned not to trust. "Finn," Margaret said gently, "this is Mr. and Mrs. Mercer. They'd like to talk to you." The boy stood, shoulders squared, chin lifted in fragile defiance. "You here to look me over? Decide if I'm worth taking?" June's heart broke a little at the bitterness in his voice. She crouched down to his level, meeting his eyes directly. "We're here to meet you," she said, "to see if maybe we'd be a good fit for each other. This isn't about worth, Finn. You have worth just by being you. This is about finding where you belong. I don't belong anywhere. Never have." "Maybe you just haven't found the right place yet." Colt spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I used to think I didn't belong anywhere either. Then I found Red Mesa, found June, found a home I didn't know I was looking for." Finn studied Colt with those two old eyes. "You're the gunfighter, the one who killed the Draven gang." "I'm a rancher now. The killing was just survival." "You scared of me?" Finn challenged. "Folks say you're dangerous." "I am dangerous when I need to be, when someone threatens what's mine." Colt paused. "But being dangerous doesn't mean being cruel, doesn't mean hurting those weaker than you. The men who hurt you at the orphanage, they were cruel. That's different from dangerous." Finn's defiance cracked slightly. "How'd you know they hurt me?" "I can see it. Same way I saw it in myself once." Colt held out his hand. "I'm not asking you to trust us right away. Trust takes time. But maybe you could come see the ranch, see if you like it. No promises either way." After a long moment, Finn took Colt's hand. His grip was tentative, ready to pull away at the first sign of rejection. They walked back to the ranch together, Finn silent but observant, taking in everything. When they arrived, his eyes widened at the newly rebuilt barn, the horses in the corral, the wide-open prairie stretching to the horizon. "It's big," he said quietly. "Plenty of room," June agreed. "Room to run, to play, to just be a child instead of—" She stopped, choosing her words carefully. "Instead of always being on guard." Over the next few hours, they showed Finn around. Colt let him help with the horses, patiently teaching him how to curry them, how to check their hooves. June watched as the boy's defenses slowly lowered, saw him relax incrementally in Colt's steady presence. When they sat down for lunch, Finn ate like he was starving, cramming food into his mouth with desperate speed. "Slow down," June said gently. "There's plenty, and no one's going to take it from you." Finn looked up, shame coloring his thin face. "Sorry, at the orphanage, you had to eat fast or the bigger boys would steal it." "Not here," Colt's voice was firm. "Here. You eat at your own pace, and if you're still hungry after, there's more." Finn's eyes filled with tears he clearly didn't want to shed. "Why are you being nice to me? You don't even know me." "Because everyone deserves kindness," June said, "and because we know what it's like to be judged for things that weren't our fault. Colt was judged for his past. I was judged for remarrying too quickly. But we found each other and built something good. Maybe you could be part of that." "You mean stay here? For real?" "If you want to." June reached across the table, offering her hand. "We're not perfect, Finn. We're still figuring out how to be married, how to run this ranch. But we have love to give, and room in our lives for someone who needs it. If you'll have us." Finn stared at her hand like it was a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Then, slowly, he reached out and took it. "I'd like that," he whispered. "I'd like that a lot." The legal arrangements took 3 weeks to finalize, but by November, Finn Abbott officially became Finn Mercer. The day the adoption papers were signed, June and Colt took him to the general store and bought him new clothes, new books, everything a growing boy might need. Mr. Morrison rang up the purchases with a genuine smile. "Good to see the Mercer family growing. That boy's lucky to have you." "We're lucky to have him," June corrected. And it was true. Finn brought joy into their lives they hadn't expected. His laughter when Colt taught him to rope, his excitement over June's cooking, his endless questions about everything from cattle to stars to why the sky was blue. He had nightmares sometimes, waking up crying from memories of the orphanage, but June or Colt would sit with him until he calmed, until he remembered he was safe now. "You're good at this," Colt observed one night after they'd tucked Finn into bed. "Being a mother. So are you, being a father. I never thought I'd get this, a family, a home, people who matter more than my own life." Colt pulled June close. "You gave me this. You and Finn both." "We gave it to each other," June said. "All 3 of us." Winter came early that year, snow falling in thick curtains across the prairie. They spent long evenings by the fire, June reading aloud while Colt whittled and Finn practiced his letters. Sometimes Sheriff Tully would stop by with news from town. Reddick and Peterson had been convicted and sentenced to 20 years each. The railroad had indeed come through Willow Creek, but the profits went to legitimate buyers who'd purchased land without insider information. Margaret Wells became a regular visitor too, joining them for Sunday dinners and slowly becoming part of their extended family. She and Finn had a special bond, teacher and student, evolving into something like aunt and nephew. On Christmas morning, June woke to find Finn had snuck downstairs before dawn to stoke the fire and start coffee. He was trying so hard to be helpful, to earn his place, and it broke her heart a little. "Finn," she said gently, wrapping a shawl around herself as she joined him in the kitchen, "you don't have to earn your place here. You belong simply because you're ours. I just wanted to help, to show I'm grateful." "We know you're grateful. But family isn't about earning or deserving. It's about loving each other, messy and imperfect as we all are." Finn hugged her then, fierce and tight, and June felt tears slip down her cheeks. This boy, this broken, beautiful boy, had healed something in her she hadn't known was wounded. When Colt came downstairs and found them embracing, he joined in without a word, wrapping his arms around both of them. They stood like that in the Christmas morning light, a family forged not by blood, but by choice, by love, by the determination to be better than their worst days. Later, after presents were opened, a new rope for Finn, a leather-bound journal for June, A new hat for Colt. They bundled up and went to church. Red Mesa's new interim reverend delivered a sermon about redemption and second chances that felt aimed directly at them. Afterward, the townspeople who'd once shunned them came forward with Christmas greetings and invitations. Mrs. Hutchkins even gave Finn a tin of cookies, though she made sure to warn him not to eat them all at once. "Look at you," Margaret said, watching the interactions with a pleased smile. "The town pariahs have become the town heroes." "We're just living our lives," June said, "same as everyone else." "No, you're living proof that people can change, that love conquers fear, that justice exists even in hard places. That matters more than you know." As they rode home through the snow-covered prairie, Finn sitting between them on the wagon seat, June reflected on everything that had happened since that morning in Judge Reddick's office when she'd been forced to marry a stranger. She'd been so angry then, so certain her life was over. But it had actually been beginning. A new life built on partnership and courage, on facing danger together, on refusing to let corrupt men define their future. "What are you thinking about?" Colt asked, reading her distant expression. "How grateful I am. For you, for Finn, for all of this." June gestured at the snow-covered ranch coming into view. "Owen's death nearly destroyed me. But in a strange way, it led me here. Led me to you. I don't know if I should feel guilty about that." "Owen would want you happy," Colt said. "He asked me to protect you, but I think he meant more than just physical safety. He meant protect your right to a full life, to love, to joy." "Do you think he knew," June asked, "that we'd fall in love?" "Maybe. Owen was smarter than people gave him credit for," Colt smiled. "Or maybe he just trusted that putting two good people together would work out somehow." "Are we good people?" Finn piped up. "Miss Margaret says we are, but some folks still whisper about Colt's past and how you killed Mr. Draven, Ma." Ma. Finn had started calling her that a few weeks ago, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Each time June heard it, her heart swelled. "We're people who try to do good," June said. "That's all anyone can be. We've made mistakes, done things we regret, but we're trying to be better. That's what matters." "I'm trying too," Finn said seriously, "to be good enough to be your son." "You are good enough," Colt ruffled the boy's hair. "More than good enough. You're exactly who you're supposed to be." They spent that winter close and warm, a family unit learning each other's rhythms. Spring came eventually, as it always did, bringing with it new growth and new beginnings. The ranch prospered. Finn grew taller and healthier, filling out with good food and love. June and Colt's marriage deepened into something solid and enduring. On a warm May evening, almost a year after their forced wedding, they stood together watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of amber and rose. Finn was fishing at the creek with Sheriff Tully, giving June and Colt a rare moment alone. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" June asked. "If Judge Reddick hadn't forced us to marry?" "All the time." Colt pulled her close. "I think about how I might have drifted on, never finding a home. How you might have lost the ranch, might have been forced into actual charity, or worse. How Finn would still be in that orphanage, suffering. Everything terrible that happened, Owen's murder, the corruption, Draven's threats. It all led us here. Doesn't make those things less terrible, but maybe it proves that even from tragedy, something good can grow." Colt kissed her softly. "I love you, June Mercer. I love the life we've built, the family we've made. I wouldn't change any of it. Not even the scary parts? Especially not the scary parts. They taught us we could survive anything together." In the distance, they heard Finn's excited shout. He'd caught a fish. His laughter carried on the evening breeze, pure and joyful, the sound of a child who knew he was loved. "We did it," June said softly. "We survived. We won. We did better than survive," Colt corrected. "We lived. Really lived." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, June leaned against her husband and thought about the journey that had brought them here. From forced marriage to true love, from grief to joy, from fear to courage. The prairie stretched vast and wild around them, full of possibility and promise. Somewhere in the gathering dark, an owl called to its mate, and another answered. Wild to wild, heart to heart, finding each other across the distance. Just like she and Colt had found each other. Just like they'd found Finn. Just like broken people everywhere found healing in the most unexpected places. The widow, the gunfighter, and the orphan boy. 3 souls who shouldn't have fit together but somehow formed a perfect whole. Their story wasn't the one anyone expected, but it was theirs, written in love and blood and determination across the wide canvas of the frontier. And as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars blazed bright above Red Mesa, June Mercer knew with absolute certainty that she was finally, truly, completely home.